All right, we'll go live on YouTube. There we go. All right. We're ready to go.
I'm going to share. All right. Good morning, friends. Welcome to our Sunday morning devotions. This one is about prayer and meditation. And as usual, I've got some music to begin with, and then the opening prayer. And I'll go ahead and say the opening prayer, and then if other folks could just jump in and say the next writings as they come up, I'd appreciate it. If nobody jumps in, as usual, I'll jump in and say that particular reading. Oh, and don't forget to unmute yourself if you're going to read. Glorified art thou, O Lord my God. I give thee thanks inasmuch as thou hast called me into being in thy days and infused into me thy love and thy knowledge. I beseech thee by thy name, whereby the goodly pearls of thy wisdom and thine utterance were brought forth out of the treasuries of the hearts of such of thy servants as are nigh unto thee, and through which the day star of thy name, the compassionate, has shed its radiance upon all that are in the heaven, all that are in thy heaven and on thy earth, to supply me by thy grace and bounty with thy wondrous and hidden bounties. These are the earliest days of my life, O my God, which thou hast linked with thine own days. Now that thou hast conferred upon me so great an honor, withhold not from me the things thou dost ordain for thy chosen ones. I am, O my God, but a tiny seed which thou hast sown in the soil of thy love and caused to spring forth by the hand of thy bounty. This seed craveth, therefore, in its inmost being for the waters of thy mercy and the living fountain of thy grace. Send down upon it from the heaven of thy loving kindness that which will enable it to flourish beneath thy shadow and within the borders of thy court. Thou art he who watereth the hearts of all that have recognized thee from the plenteous stream and the fountain of thy living waters. Praise be God, the Lord of the worlds.
Meditation brings wisdom. Lack of meditation is folly. These are the two roads, one leading forward, one leads backwards. And further, by putting aside happiness and malaise, and by passing away of joy and melancholy, he enters into the fourth stage of meditative contemplation, where he is in a state of perfect purity, mindfulness, and equanimity, wherein there is felt neither pain nor pleasure.
Happy is the man that hath not walked in the counsel of the wicked, nor stood in the way of sinners, nor sat in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and his law doth he meditate day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by streams of water, that bringeth forth its fruit in its season, and whose leaf doth not wither, and in whatsoever he doeth, he shall prosper.
Ask and it shall be given you, seek and ye shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you. For everyone that asketh receiveth, and he that seeketh findeth, and to him that knocketh it shall be opened.
Therefore remember me, I will remember you, and give me thanks, and be not ungrateful. O ye who believe, seek help with patience and with prayer, for God is with the patient. A blessed book have we sent down to thee, that men may meditate its verses, and that those imbued with understanding may bear it in mind.
Through the faculty of meditation, man attains the eternal life. Through it, he receives the breath of the Holy Spirit. The bestowal of the Spirit is given in reflection and meditation. The spirit of man is itself informed and strengthened during meditation. Through it, the affairs of which man knew nothing or unfolded before his view. Through it, he receives divine inspiration. Through it, he receives heavenly food.
Oh God, refresh and gladden my spirit, purify my heart, illumine my powers. I lay all my affairs in thy hand. Thou art my guide and my refuge. I will no longer be sorrowful and grieved. I will be a happy and joyful being. Oh God, I will no longer be full of anxiety, nor will I let the trouble harass me. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. Oh God, thou art more friend to me than I am to myself. I dedicate myself to thee, oh Lord, oh Lord.
Glory be to thee. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Glory be to thee, O God. Thou art the God who hath existed before all things, who will exist after all things, and will last beyond all things. Thou art the God who knoweth all things, and is supreme over all things. Thou art the God who dealeth mercifully with all things, who judgeth between all things, and whose vision embraceth all things. Thou art God, my Lord. Thou art aware of my position. Thou dost witness my inner and outer being. Grant thy forgiveness unto me and unto the believers who responded to thy call. Be thou my sufficing helper against the mischief of whosoever may desire to inflict sorrow upon me or wish me ill. Verily, thou art the Lord of all created things. Thou dost suffice everyone, while no one can be self-sufficient without thee.
Thank you, everyone. If there are any folks that want to say additional prayers, just remember to unmute yourself.
I'd say a healing prayer for a couple of our friends that have COVID. O God, my God, I beg of thee by the ocean of thy healing, and by the splendors of the day star of thy grace, and by thy name through which thou didst subdue thy servants, and by the pervasive power of thy most exalted word, and the potency of thy most august pen, and by thy mercy that hath preceded the creation of all who are in heaven and on earth, to purge me with the waters of thy bounty from every affliction and disorder, and from all weakness and feebleness. Thou seest, O my Lord, thy suppliant waiting at the door of thy bounty, and him who hath set his hopes on thee, clinging to the cord of thy generosity. Deny him not, I beseech thee, the things he seeketh from the ocean of thy grace, and the day star of thy loving kindness. Offer, our God, to do what pleaseth thee. There is none other God save thee, the ever forgiving, the most generous. Baha'u'llah.
Prayer is the key. Prayer is the key. Prayer is the master key. Oh, prayer in the morning. Prayer in the evening. Prayer is the master key. Oh, prayer is the key. Prayer is healing. Prayer is healing. Prayer is healing for the sick. Oh, when I say that prayer, I get healing every day. Prayer is the master key. Prayer is the key. Prayer is power. Prayer is power. Prayer is power for the sick. Oh, when I say that prayer, I get strength every day. Prayer is the master key. Oh, prayer is the key.
Thou seest, O Lord, our suppliant hands lifted up towards the heaven of thy favor and bounty. Grant that they may be filled with the treasures of thy munificence and bountiful favor. Forgive us and our fathers and our mothers, and fulfill whatsoever we have desired from the ocean of thy grace and divine generosity. Accept, O beloved of our hearts, all our works in thy path. Thou art verily the most powerful, the most exalted, the incomparable, the one, the forgiving, the gracious.
I would chant a Persian prayer. Hovallah, Khudaya, ma zaifim, to qawi kun. ما نادانیم تو دانا فرما خدایا فقیریم غنای ملکوتی ده. خدایا مرده ای حیات سرمدی بخش. خدایا ذلت محضی در ملکوت عزیز فرما. اگر تعداد آسمانی شامل گردد، هر یک از ما ستاره درخشنده گردد، و الا از خاک پستر شود. خدایا تایید کن، نصرت فرما، ما را غالب بر نفس و هوا کن، و از عالم طبیعت نجات ده. خدایا به نفسات روح القدس زنده فرما، تا به خدمت تو قیام نماییم و عبادت تو مشغول گردیم، و با نهایت صدق و صفا به انتشار آثار ملکوتت پردازیم. تویی مقتدر و توانا، و تویی بخشنده و مهربان. آمین.
I'm going to say a prayer for the departed, for Mr. Hussein Yezdani, who passed away a couple of days ago. He is God, exalted is he, Lord of loving kindness and bounty. Glory be unto thee, thou, O my God, the Lord omnipotent. I testify to thine omnipotence and thy might, thy sovereignty and thy loving kindness, thy grace and thy power, the oneness of thy being and the unity of thine essence, thy sanctity and exaltation above the world of being and all that is therein. O my God, thou seest me detached from all save thee, holding fast unto thee, and turning unto the ocean of thy bounty, to the heaven of thy favor, to the day star of thy grace. Lord, I bear witness that in thy servant thou hast reposed thy trust, and that is the spirit wherewith thou hast given life to the world. I ask thee, by the splendor of the orb of thy revelation, mercifully to accept from him that which he hath achieved in thy days. Grant then that he may be invested with the glory of thy good pleasure and adorned with thine acceptance. O my Lord, I myself and all created things bear witness unto thy might, and I pray thee not to turn away from thyself, the spirit that hath ascended unto thee, unto thy heavenly place, thine exalted paradise and thy retreats of nearness, O thou who art the Lord of all men. Grant then, O my God, that thy servant may consort with thy chosen ones, thy saints and thy messengers in heavenly places that the pen cannot tell, nor the tongue recount. O my Lord. The poor one hath verily hastened unto the kingdom of thy wealth, the stranger unto his home within thy precincts. He that is sore athirst to the heavenly river of thy bounty, deprive him not, O Lord, from his share of the banquet of thy grace, and from the favor of thy bounty. Thou art in truth the Almighty, the gracious, the all-bountiful. O my God, thy trust hath been returned unto thee. It behoveth thy grace and thy bounty that have compassed thy dominions on earth and in heaven, to vouchsafe unto thy newly welcomed ones thy gifts and thy bestowals, and the fruits of the tree of thy grace. Powerful art thou to do as thou willest. There is none other God but thee, the gracious, the most bountiful, the compassionate, the bestower, the pardoner, the precious, the all-knowing. I testify, O my Lord, that thou hast enjoined upon men to honor their guest, and he that hath ascended unto thee hath verily reached thee and attained thy presence. Deal with him then, according to thy grace and bounty. By thy glory, I know of a certainty that thou wilt not withhold from thyself that which thou hast commanded thy servants, nor wilt thou deprive him that he hath clung to the cord of thy bounty and hath ascended to the dayspring of thy wealth. There is none other God but thee, the one, the single, the powerful, the omniscient, the bountiful.
Thank you, Chris, for the prayer for Mr. Hushain Mazidi, Shiva's father. Well, friends, I guess we'll transition to the fireside part of of our Sunday morning program. Laura, thank you for the wonderful devotions.
Welcome.
So a thought was that we could use this this forum to go over, the Ridván message. I'll quickly explain what that is. And first of all, since it is a fireside, the Baha'i faith, just wanted to, discuss very broadly that, the Baha'i faith is an independent world religion, has adherents in almost every country and territory in the world, is considered to be second most widespread in terms of geographic spread. Its aim is unity of the peoples of the world, and that it believes that this is a continuation of God revealing himself to us, humanity, successively over the ages. And so with that, currently the faith has an administration. It's led by an elected administration called the Universal House of Justice. The Universal House of Justice is seated in Haifa, Israel, and that is where the Baha'i World Center is located. The Universal House of Justice every year around Ridvan, which we are currently in the 12-day period of Ridvan, a time celebrating the prophet founder of the faith, Baha'u'llah, revealing revealing that he was, who he was, that he had the station of the most recent manifestation of God. Ridván is the time period when he did that, and it was in the year 1863, and every Ridván, our Universal House of Justice, will send out a message to the Baha'is of the world. And so we have, and it varies in length and in, it just depends on what our Baha'i community needs to know about and hear. Sometimes there's big announcements in there. And so this year it is 8 pages long and pretty heady, things to read through. And I've, thought it might benefit us to start reading it. I don't know that we'll be able to get through all 8 pages, to be frank. I mean, we could. I've tried to put this in PowerPoint for us to be able to go through, and let me share that right now. And let me know if you can see this. All right. What I'll do is I will go into presentation mode. And please let me know if you can't see everything, because it's hard for me to know how much of what's on the screen you can see. Hopefully you can see everything here. Yes?
Well, I can't see the words. I mean, I see.
Right, this is just can you see all the images? The words you can't read perhaps because they're too small, but can you see?
Yes, I see the images.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting us to read from it all like this.
Okay.
I did want to, but can you see the middle of the screen right now? Because I'm putting something in there, or is it blocked by some? It's not blocked, right?
I see the 1 through 22, Nabil. Is that all we need to see?
Perfect. And the stuff on the left you see as well, yes?
Yeah.
So I try to put a visual so that we know where we are in the message. And in fact, the other thing I would really like to do is send everyone a link to it if you don't have it already. Let me quickly do that. Hold on just a second. Because then you can also choose to read along. So let me send a link real quickly to everyone. I'll put it in the chat. I apologize for not having this handy just yet. Let's go here. All right. Everyone. All right. Sorry for that diversion. I just want to make sure everyone has a link to the original document. So what I've tried to do is for us to go over this in sections. And so what I've done is I've basically, I labeled the paragraph numbers. I took liberties to do that, and I apologize for that. I just wanted to be able to, so that we know where we are and we can refer to it. I don't know that this is anything official. I just numbered the paragraphs as the House of Justice had written them. And then the sections are also not of my own making. If you notice here, there's like a little asterisk here that in the letters that separate, certain sections. And so I've labeled these sections 1 through 4, and I apologize again for taking that liberty, but I think it helps us to sort of know where we are in the document. And this is just, sort of my own construction here. So my apologies for those liberties I take, but I think it might help us to know where we are as we're reading through things. But again, these, the asterisk is not, I didn't invent the sections. I'm just naming them sections 1 through 4. All right. So let's start reading, and I will stop talking. I would like to have some volunteers. And then what I was thinking is maybe what we can do is, as we read through things, we could, offer our thoughts on each of the sections. And if there aren't any, we can keep reading the next section. But there may be some things to, to make note of in every section. I've also tried to have a little, text box open. Does this cover anything? Sorry, I just opened something on my screen. I don't know if it covers anything. Can you still see everything on the page?
Yes, I think
Wonderful.
so.
Okay. So I have a little notepad open here, and I can take notes on what we come up with as far as like, oh, this is what this paragraph tells me if we want to. But we can also just keep reading through. So don't feel the need to have to say something, but if something comes to mind, please do. All right, so who can I have a volunteer to start reading?
I can start. This is Laura.
Thank you.
Universal House of Justice, Ridván 2021, to the Baha'is of the world. Dearly loved friends, the final words in a most memorable chapter in the history of the cause have now been written, and the page turns. This Ridván marks the conclusion of an extraordinary year, of a 5-year plan, and of an entire series of plans that began in 1996. A new series of plans beckons with what promises to be a momentous 12 months, serving as a prelude to a 9-year effort due to commence next Ridván. We see before us a community that has rapid strides forward, but there must be no illusions about how much striving was required to reach this point.
Sorry, Laura, your audio has dropped out.
Oh,
I think you may have repositioned your microphone or something.
well, I'm on a laptop, so I don't
Okay.
have, can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes, perfectly.
Yeah, I don't know why it drops out. We see before us. Okay. Okay, we're trying to figure out where the mic is on this thing because it's happened before. Okay, let me see. Can you? Okay,
Yes.
you can still hear me. Okay. But there must be no illusions about how much striving was required to reach this point, and how hard won were the insights acquired along the way. The lessons learned will shape the community's future, and the account of how they were learned sheds light on what is to come.
Okay, friends, any thoughts on that? So the one thing I see in here, it discusses, having concluded a series of plans starting 25 years ago, and preparing us for, after a 1-year interval, to start a 9-year plan. So I think we'll go on to the next. Do we have a volunteer to read?
Yeah, I'll read. The decades leading up to 1996, rich with advances and insights of their own, had left no doubt that large numbers of people in many societies would be ready to enter under the banner of the faith. Yet, as encouraging as instances of large-scale enrollment were, they did not equate to sustainable process of growth that could be cultivated in diverse settings. Profound questions faced the community, which at that time, it had insufficient experience to answer adequately. How could efforts aimed at its expansion proceed hand in hand with the process of consolidation and resolve the long-standing, seemingly intractable challenge of sustaining growth? How could individuals, institutions, and communities be raised up that would be capable of translating Baha'u'llah's teaching into action? And how could those who were attracted to the teachings become protagonists in the global spiritual enterprise?
Thank you. Any thoughts on this one? So feel free to unmute your mic and offer if you have any thoughts. And what I read here is sort of the difficulty of sustaining activities. There was, I guess in the history of the faith, there have been a lot of evidences of being able to attract large numbers of people to the faith. And then the question becomes, what does one do once that happens? And I think as a Baha'i community, that's been sort of an ongoing struggle to figure out. And so that was, as at least the decades leading up to 1996. So something different was needed. Who would like to read paragraph 3?
I can. So it was that a quarter of a century ago, a Baha'i community that could still count 3 hands of the cause of God in its front ranks embarked on a 4-year plan, distinguished from those that came before by its focus on a single aim, a significant advance in the process of entry by troops. This aim came to define the series of plans that followed. The community had already come to understand that this process was not just the entry into the faith of sizable groups, nor would it emerge spontaneously. It implied purposeful, systematic, accelerated expansion and consolidation. This work would require the informed participation of a great many souls, and in 1996, the Baha'i world was summoned to take up the vast educational challenge this entailed. It was called to establish a network of training institutes focused on generating an increasing flow of individuals endowed with the necessary capabilities to sustain the process of growth.
Thank you, Joanna. So it talks about the start of the 4-year plan and sort of very being laser focused on, how do we make an advance in the process of entry by troops. I remember entry by troops being talked about when I was a kid in the early 80s. That was been something that was a goal, a desire, something to also be to be prepared for, and how does a community deal with significant increase among its ranks. So, so in 1996, the Universal House of Justice asked for training institutes to be set up, a network of training institutes. All right. I wanted to quickly show something before we go on, which I think might be useful, and that is this graphic here. It's part of a larger graphic, which I'll show later on. But let me show you quickly what that larger graphic is. This was prepared by, in fact, one of the late members of our Baha'i community here in Austin, Mr. John Conkling. So this is, it puts like an overview of the various ages and epochs in our faith. So, and it sort of makes a visual, and for me, I'm very much a visual learner. So I like to, be able to see things and I grasp it better. But part of this larger thing is the last part here, which he made this in the year 2006, or at least updated it in the year 2006. And at that point, it was already known that there were going to be more 5-year plans up until 2021. So that this was as forward-looking as he was able to be. Of course, now we know that there will be a 1-year and then a 9-year plan after this, but this shows the 25-year period that the House of Justice is talking about here in section 1. So now with that said, we'll go back to, we had just read paragraph 3, and we'll now go on to paragraph 4.
I can read.
Yeah, thank you.
The friends set about this task aware that, notwithstanding their previous victories in the teaching field, plainly they had much to learn about which capacities to acquire and, crucially, how to acquire them. In many ways, the community would learn by doing, and the lessons it learned, once they had been distilled and refined by being applied in diverse settings over time, would eventually be incorporated into educational materials. It was recognized that certain activities were a natural response to the spiritual needs of a population. Study circles, children's classes, devotional meetings, and later junior youth groups stood out as being of central importance in this regard. And when woven together with the related activities, the dynamics generated could give rise to a vibrant pattern of community life. And as the numbers participating in these core activities grew, a new dimension was added to their original purpose. They came to serve as portals through which youth, adults, and whole families from the wider society could come into an encounter with the revelation of Baha'u'llah. I want to read that again. That was kind of interesting. Whole families from the wider society could come into an encounter with the revelation of Baha'u'llah. It was also becoming apparent how practical.
Oh, sorry. There we go.
I have to find the word practical here.
Oh, so this was how practical, and then I went to the next page.
Okay. It was to consider strategies for the work of community building within the context of the cluster, a geographic area of manageable size with distinct social and economic features. A capacity for preparing simple plans at the level of the cluster began to be cultivated, and out of such plans, programs for the growth of the faith arose. Oh, wait a minute, was I supposed to keep reading?
Yes.
Oh, organized into what would become 3-month cycles of activity. An important point of clarity emerged early on. The movement of individuals through a sequence of courses gives impetus to and is perpetuated by the movement of clusters along a continuum of development. This complementary relationship helped the friends everywhere to assess the dynamics of growth in their own surroundings and chart a path toward increased strength. As time went on, it proved fruitful to view what was occurring in a cluster, both from the perspective of 3 educational imperatives: serving children, junior youth, and youth and adults, as well as from the perspective of the cycle of activity essential to the rhythm of growth. Partway into a 25-year endeavor, many of the most recognizable features of the growth process we see today were becoming well established.
So yes, that was paragraph 4 had to fit on 2 pages. So yes, thank you for continuing to read, Gabrielle. So yeah, thoughts on that. It's you know, the house seems to be sort of trying to summarize for us or give us sort of the view of history, and also, you know, more the immediate history of the last 25 years, to help us see what it is that they have been directing all along, which, you know, it's sometimes hard for us to understand why at a certain time something is happening. And I think this may help us to see, you know, first of all, what the situation was in our community, you know, at the time, and where they were trying to lead us to. And at this point, I think, you know, over a lot of the concepts that are discussed here 25 years ago were, you know, some of them were not even, you know, hadn't even been discussed yet. And in, you know, in the larger Baha'i world, like a junior youth, you know, spiritual empowerment program had not, you know, hadn't even come up yet in the Baha'i world in general. So talking about these things that we now just, you know, sometimes casually refer to as core activities, they're kind of the building blocks of a community. And so yeah, this is a very, you know, a nice, you know, way of sort of taking us through this time period. Any other thoughts on this? I'll go on to paragraph 5. And looking for a volunteer to read.
I can read, Nabil.
Wonderful.
As the efforts of the Friends intensified, various principles, concepts, and strategies of universal relevance to the growth process began to crystallize into a framework of action that could evolve to accommodate new elements. This framework proved fundamental to the release of tremendous vitality. It assisted the Friends to channel their energies in ways that experience had shown were conducive to the growth of healthy communities. But a framework is not a formula. By taking into account the various elements of the framework when assessing the reality of a cluster, a locality, or simply a neighborhood, a pattern of activity could be developed that drew on what the rest of the Baha'i world was learning while still being a response to the particulars of that place. A dichotomy between rigid requirements on the one hand and limitless personal preferences on the other gave way to a more nuanced understanding of the variety of means by which individuals could support a process that, at its heart, was coherent and continually being refined as experience accumulated. Let there be no doubt about the advance represented by the emergence of this framework, the implications for harmonizing and unifying the endeavors of the entire Baha'i world and propelling its onward march were of great consequence. So by the framework, are they referring to the Ruhi classes?
What do others, would others like to share or help share their thoughts on that? On this framework for action?
Would that also include the clusters?
I think
Yeah.
the framework
Go
action
ahead.
really has many elements. And one of it is the training institute. The other one is junior youth program, children classes, study circles. So those are all the elements of the framework.
I think the important sentence here is the last sentence, where they're essentially saying, for the first time in Baha'i history, the entire community, regardless of where you reside, is pursuing the expansion of the faith and the practice of the faith. For the most part, I would say practice probably might not be the best choice of words, in one mode of action that includes all the components that were just mentioned.
Thank you. That's a very good point as well. Because the harmonizing that it refers to, right, is it's sort of getting everyone aligned, right? Everyone on the same page on like, here are how we go about it, and this is the framework that all should seek to follow. But then in the middle, they also mention this part here, that a framework is not a formula. Oh, and I just clicked and I did that, sorry. Framework is not a formula, which you see, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but so I think what I'm also reading is that even though the whole Baha'i world is supposed to follow this framework, there is a lot of room for adjusting it to the needs, the exigencies, what the reality on the ground is, that what does your community need? What is your neighborhood looking for? It doesn't do much good to put together a junior youth program in a community that has mostly, elderly people, for example. They might need something else in that particular group. What is the community asking for, in a way, right? You have to kind of read what you have and then respond to the needs of your particular situation. And I think it says that it allows for that because it has to, it has to be able to be adjusted, and talking about, having, not looking at things as, well, we have to rigidly follow this one thing, or everyone do whatever they want. Have a framework, have something that people can follow and make adjustments as they can along the way.
I think striking that balance is so critical to having a vibrant community. Sometimes if things get too rigid, you don't leave space for the arts and other things. And so I just think it's important, to have that internal consultation and make sure you don't leave out things because maybe they don't fall rigidly, as, we're talking into, a program.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, the arts are you brought up the arts as an example. That's something that is very much sort of encouraged, in study circles and whatnot. But it's also sometimes in some areas and communities and maybe regions, harder for some people to connect to. But it is, it is wonderful if we can put expression into that and help people to, bring their own sort of contributions in that regard.
So I feel like what I've been thinking about this whole time, it's like, well, not the whole world isn't about me, but my life is definitely all about me, right? And with that comes a rhythm that might be, so going back to that phrase, the framework is not a formula. And I feel like for me, because I don't operate within a family network, and there isn't, I mean, not that I know of any Baha'i that are like in my immediate area. And I don't have anywhere of, so speaking of like coming up with a formula that, let's say, would work for me that I find missing, that would be super helpful, is I often miss out on other groups. Because I find out about them after the times have been set. And let's say that time doesn't work for me.
Mhm.
And what could work for me is like some kind of accessible, maybe not if calendar, but listing of times that people can plug into, so that there's some kind of it's not necessarily standard, but that other people can plan and they can see who is available at those times, who would not be, how many people, or if so, speaking to area versus someone whose schedule, as mine, is particularly challenging, can jump into whatever networks, because I feel like I haven't been able to be a part of a group because of the changing dynamics. And then even when technically I'm available, because it's a new thing in my schedule and that thing changes all the time depending on um, the group organizing it, that it's hard to juggle lots of moving parts and moving times on moving days. So for me, that's been challenging. And I don't want to make it harder on the people who manage our online system. And I know a lot of this is done through WhatsApp groups, but I find myself on the later end of finding out about things at times that, that I just can't make.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, creating a formula, I guess, is what I'm speaking to now. And if anybody else has challenges, how do people deal with that? Where do they go? I know Maggie and I went to school together, and Maggie reaches out to me all the time. But our schedules don't always align either. But I definitely would like an opportunity to connect with maybe even people I don't know and who maybe aren't in my immediate area, but who have my same insane schedule.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a wonderful point. I think it sounds like maybe having some type of collaborative scheduling, or as while the idea is still sort of nascent and someone's trying to maybe put together a study circle or something of the sort, to maybe start collaborating ahead of time on like, when can we do this, and seeing whose schedules can mesh. There's got to be some online tools for that. Is that what you were thinking?
I'm thinking whatever works. So sure. I mean, I think in the way that this entire process has been trial and error, that it's worth the effort of exploring.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Any other thoughts before we go on to paragraph 6? All right, and this one is going to be 2 pages as well. So a volunteer.
I can do it.
Wonderful.
As one plan succeeded another, and engagement with the work of community building became more broadly based, advances at the level of culture became more pronounced. For instance, the importance of educating the younger generations became more widely appreciated, as did the extraordinary potential represented by junior youth in particular. Souls assisting and accompanying one another along a shared path, constantly widening the circle of mutual support, became the pattern to which all efforts aimed at developing capacity for service aspired. Even the interactions of the friends among themselves and with those around them underwent a change as awareness was raised of the power of meaningful conversations to kindle and fan spiritual susceptibilities. And significantly, Baha'i communities adopted an increasingly outward-looking orientation. Any soul responsive to the vision of the faith could become an active participant, even a promoter and facilitator of educational activities, meetings for worship, and other elements of the community building work. From among such souls, many would also declare their faith in Baha'u'llah. Thus, a conception of the process of entry by troops emerged that relied less on theories and assumptions and more on actual experience of how large numbers of people could find the faith, become familiar with it, identify with its aims, join in its activities and deliberations, and in many cases, embrace it. Indeed, as the Institute process was strengthened in region after region, the number of individuals taking a share in the work of the plan, extending even to those recently acquainted with the faith, grew by leaps and bounds. But this was not being driven by a mere concern for numbers. A vision of personal and collective transformation occurring simultaneously, founded on study of the Word of God and an appreciation of each person's capacity to become a protagonist in a profound spiritual drama, had given rise to a sense of common endeavor.
Thank you, Jane. So, any thoughts?
Personally, I love that it says not driven by numbers, because that's something that used to really make me uncomfortable. I love that this is focused on the individual, on everyone's capacity and everyone's worth.
Yeah. Yeah, agree. And talks about both personal and collective transformation. Earlier, a few paragraphs ago, there was reference made to not just individuals going through this sequence of Ruhi courses, for example, but also the entire cluster also having a movement or progressing in a way, as it starts having more and more activities, there is some, progress there, some additional capacities that as a community you have, as you start, having more people that individually transform or individually gain more capacities, then collectively you do as well as a community.
I think there's a couple of things that come to mind for me in this paragraph. One is that, again, over the years, to be just very frank about it, the Baha'i faith's numbers, especially in the West, and for sure in the United States, have been fairly stagnant. And one of the reasons for that stagnation is that our inability to retain young people within the faith once they entered the age of maturity. That we would have people come into the faith, but probably just as many would be departing from the faith, despite having been exposed and raised in the faith. And I think the hope is that by engaging young people in a structured way through junior youth groups and children's classes, many of these people
as they mature, will find a spiritual path that can sustain them through the faith and remain in the faith, and hopefully, spiritually mature into adulthood with the guidance of the faith. And the second thing is that I personally believe that we are trying to, in some ways, recalibrate what it means to have troops. What does that exactly mean? And whether or not we should perhaps expand our minds to have people participate in Baha'i activities, but not necessarily wear the uniform of the Baha'i faith. People who may want to be engaged in the, for lack of a better word, war that the forces of good and forces of evil are conducting, but not necessarily wear a badge that identifies them as a member of the Baha'i faith. And we are trying to expand ourselves to include such people in our communities, in our activities.
Right. I agree with your with how you've structured that. Yes, I've noticed that as well, that there's a lot of discussion about, here's the things we're doing to build community, and there are a lot of people that are joining us in that, whether they call themselves Baha'i or not. They're working towards the same goals that we are, and so, are those, do we consider those to be, quote unquote, the troops, right? We're working towards the same aims, and we're all, rowing our boats in the same direction, type of thing. Advancing the aims of the cause, no matter what badge you wear, to your example. Thank you, Ruzbe.
I wanted to say something about losing our youth. I was raised kids in that generation of youth who did not stay with the faith in large numbers. And I feel like we still need further research. We can't stop now. We need to continue, because it is studies show that the more urbanized an environment becomes, the less religious it becomes. So we're fighting against, culture that they're simultaneously experiencing along with the faith. And I remember that when we stopped having Baha'i children's classes and did this larger reach into the community, it was beneficial because we were no longer, we never had the us and them mentality, but perhaps at one time we had that kind of structure without even understanding that we did. And so, but one thing that happened is they weren't learning the details of their own faith, because we stopped the Baha'i children's classes and then did the more broader virtues classes. And so I think that, just to state again, I think we need more research and continued research on how we can help youth, junior youth and youth, kind of bridge that challenge we have of the larger society pulling away from religion and spirituality, or maybe just organized religion, not necessarily spirituality, and how to create that spiritual understanding within our junior youth and youth. So, and I know that we already have, a lot that we're doing, but I just hope the research doesn't stop.
Yeah, very important point. Yeah, I think there's, this is just, personal thought, but we have at this point, fairly fleshed out programming for children and junior youth, and that goes up to age 15. And from that point on, right now, there's not really much that is specific for the youth. Once they're in high school or, age 15, and, they have reached the age of spiritual maturity, but so the study circles are available to them. But I think there's more more that needs that is specific for that age group. I know that there's been a big several years back, I think it was in 2013 if I'm not mistaken, very strong efforts for reaching out to the youth, and the youth at that point was that age group was defined as, I believe, 15 through 30. So youth and young adults, and sort of getting there, trying to harness their energy and help to direct their energies to advancing themselves, but also orienting their lives towards a life of service. And I think those efforts have definitely borne fruit. I think locally also we need to think about how do we try to engage folks in that sort of critical sort of high school and early college years of one's life. Any other thoughts? Because the next paragraph will actually talk about youth. All right. So could we have a volunteer to read paragraph 7, which is the last paragraph of the first section? Someone who maybe hasn't read yet, does somebody want to read? If not, we'll ask previous readers to read again.
I can read.
Wonderful.
One of the most striking and inspiring features of this 25-year period has been the service rendered by Baha'i youth, who, with faith and valor, have assumed their rightful place in the forefront of the community's efforts. As teachers of the cause and educators of the young, as mobile tutors and homefront pioneers, as cluster coordinators and members of Baha'i agencies, youth on 5 continents have arisen to serve their communities with devotion and sacrifice. The maturity they have demonstrated in the discharge of duties upon which depends the advancement of the divine plan is expressive of their spiritual vitality and their commitment to safeguarding humanity's future. In recognition of this increasing evident maturity, we have decided that immediately following this Ridván, while the age at which a believer becomes eligible to serve on a spiritual assembly shall remain 21, the age at which a believer may vote in Baha'i elections shall be lowered to 18. We have no doubt that Baha'i youth everywhere who are of age will indicate our confidence in their ability to fulfill, conscientiously and diligently, the sacred duty to which every Baha'i elector is called. I think, to be honest with you, I think this sentence sort of represents to me the whole purpose and the magnificence for this letter of the Universal House of Justice. I mean, they clearly have taken hold of their role as guides and directors and authority of the faith, and very effectively balance encouragement with guidance. I mean, they essentially are saying that, we were hoping for this to happen, we saw it happen, and that makes us feel confident to be able to now move forward with the administrative aspects of the faith by increasing the contributions of a larger populace.
Thank you for that thought. Yeah, this is a major announcement. Up to now, that the age of either voting or being eligible to serve on an assembly had been 21. And so we're now seeing that, that vote being given to those age 18 and up.
I just want to add one more thing, is that in the Baha'i faith, voting is not something minor. It is actually a big deal. If you think about it, when you lose your administrative rights, the biggest thing that you lose is your ability to vote. People can engage with you, can participate in relating with you, but the biggest sanction on that is the inability to vote. So in the Baha'i structure of things, voting is a big deal, and it's allowing people to participate in community life in a way that, unfortunately, as we see outside of the Baha'i world, completely deteriorating nationally, locally, in many, many ways. So to me, this was a huge deal to expand the community and engage a large population in Baha'i activities and Baha'i administrative life.
Yeah. Well, and looking at it just in our local sort of reality, reading our local reality, we are a community that gets regularly influx of those 18 and older, because there's people coming to study at the University of Texas or St. Edwards or Houston Tillotson, but we get and so here's another way for them to really feel like they are a part of this Baha'i community that they're maybe new to, and are able to engage and their votes or their thoughts matter in this process. Our election system, of course, is quite different from that of the outside world, in that it is done in secret, it is done in private, and it is not announced, and it is not there's no campaigning, nothing of the sort. So and yet we contribute, each person gets one vote to help set the course for things in their Baha'i community, both on the spiritual assembly, but they talk about Baha'i elections, and I would imagine that it also means, for example, the unit convention, which is where we elect a delegate who goes to the national convention to vote for the National Spiritual Assembly. And then, of course, in turn, the National Spiritual Assembly members every 5 years vote for the Universal House of Justice. So it puts somebody now at age 18 in a position to be able to vote for a delegate, to be able to go serve as, for a delegate to go, to our national convention, who would then eventually every 5 years also elect the Universal House of Justice. Now it mentions here, I want to spend a little bit of time getting people's thoughts on the things that the youth have done, in these past 25 years. It talks about being educators of the young. We know that the youth, the older youth, meaning the young adults, are oftentimes, or even those who are still, have just become youth, age 15, 16, 17, are some of the most effective animators for junior youth, because that's who the junior youth look up to. that's who they oftentimes want to emulate. And so, that is hugely important. But then even as, as home front pioneers, as they go, to serve in various places, be it a year of service or be it, for, other periods of time. So there's a lot of things that our youth have been, carrying and going around. And an observation that someone had made is, and not just someone, I think the Universal House of Justice made this, over many communications, but we now have the youth of today, the young adults of today, were raised in this new way of doing things, right? With this framework for action and the core activities and the various components of it. That is for them the way things have always been done in their lives, right? And so there's something very special about them, because their orientation didn't have to be redirected into like, this is now how we're doing things. For them, this is how we do things, So any thoughts on that? Okay. Well, friends, we are at the 12 o'clock hour. I would like to share, we are about to, the next phase would have been paragraph 8 in section 2. I've tried to sort of keep the same color coding here that I started with over here, so that it's a little bit more clear. I'm happy to share this if anyone finds this this useful, but it's essentially the same letter. It's just numbered with with paragraphs and whatnot. But we went over 9 slides today. There are 32 slides in all for this Ridván message, and so we will have to pick this up another time. Perhaps another person would lead this, the discussion. I do want to sort of, go to the, the very last, the last paragraph is this where, the House of Justice talks about that, our divine plan entering a new epoch and a new stage, and the page is turned. That is stuff that should yet be discussed and will have relevance to this graphic that our dear friend John Conkling had helped put together. And in fact, the Universal House of Justice had commented on this as well. And I can share the link to this particular graphic as well, if for those who are interested.
Yeah, please share that. Please share that link.
All right, let me go. I will find. I have that link here, and I'll put that in our chat here. Let's see. All right. So, I think what we can do, if Chris can end our live stream, we can just kind of have informal discussions and talk and see how everyone's doing, and we can talk about this topic, or, you know, what you're planning to do today. So Chris, can you give us a signal when that has completed? I wonder if that is something